Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm very excited today to be joined by Dennis Schmidt, who is Chief Quality Officer at Aristocrat, which is a public gaming company with billions of dollars in revenue. So it's quite a very senior person, and thank you for joining for this interview. What I'm very interested about this interview is that we are going to cover you worked in some multiple areas that most software people might not be familiar with. I think the company will talk about this is in the gaming industry. People might not be familiar with this. There is also your background in the defense, in the military, and defense contracting, like for 2 decades, and the transition that you've done, and also overall quality engineering, which is a very interesting field that I learned about this back in the RMS, Moody's, and I'm very interested to have other people also kind of learn about this. And yeah, and I'm looking forward to learn from you for your insights. And fun fact, so I had the pleasure of us working together with RMS. I remember you very favorably, one of the most positive people I worked with, and that was fun. Hopefully we might have a chance to do it again in the future. So maybe to start, can you tell us about your current role in Aristocrat? What is a Chief Quality Officer? What do they do?
I can try to do that, Itay, and thank you very much. And as when we did work together in RMS, I remember you as being one of the very passionate individuals there at the company when it was, we had that startup mentality, and we went from, CD-ROMs to the cloud, and that was quite the journey that we took together, and it was very exciting. So now, I guess forward 6 years, I've been with Aristocrat, and I'm now currently the Chief Quality Officer for Aristocrat. But let me just tell you a little bit about the journey, and then maybe that'll give you an idea of what a Chief Quality Officer does and some of my roles and responsibilities. So after leaving RMS in the Bay Area, I came to Las Vegas to join Aristocrat Technologies, which is an Australian listed on the ASX company. It was primarily on that what we call traditional land-based gaming. So what we do is we create content games. We develop the hardware for a slot machine, or we call them electronic gaming machines. So we have mathematicians, software engineers, test engineers, we have sound people, we have artists. So we actually build these cabinets from the ground up with many different disciplines of engineering across the board, along with a lot of product and program managers and support. So they asked me to come here and help them with their game quality. So back then, about 6 years ago, our company was growing extremely fast. We went from probably a $200 or $300 million company to $1 billion company in a span of maybe 2 years, because our content was so engaging. The players loved to play our games. But when we were moving so fast and so quickly, our processes really didn't keep up with this huge amount of volume in games. So we had a problem that out of every 100 games, we probably had 30 that had to be reworked. And in this business, it's highly regulated business. So it was really important. It's not one of those where you're working with a SaaS or an application where you launch it and then you improve it over time, right? This one is kind of like you want to do the one and done, right? You want to launch a game. It's got to be of very high quality. And you hope not to have to touch it again, because that would mean you'd have to go into a casino. You have to take the game. There's a lot of things in there that really make it challenging when you have software, hardware, or any combination of tech stack, because those electronic gaming machines are actually little mini computers, right? They've got their own tech stack, their own GDK. They've got their own platform. They've got their hardware and software, and then you've got bill acceptors, and you've got loyalty programs, carding. So they're very complex, and they require a lot of attention to doing things right the first time. And that's where we had a problem because we moved so fast, we grew so quickly that we didn't have the best practices kind of nailed down as far as how do we then launch these cabinets and feel very confident that the quality of those cabinets matched the quality of the game experience. So I started within the design and development organization to really help the hardware, software engineering teams kind of get a build and release process that could work for everybody, and then you could repeat it and you could scale it, right? Because again, if you roll forward again to 5 or 6 years, and we're a $6 billion company now, so you can't do that without having good practices around engineering, software development, build and release, and it was really challenging. So after kind of establishing that foothold within design and development, it expanded into the hardware and integration or manufacturing area too, because obviously we have a lot of suppliers. We use China, we use Mexico, we use all of these global companies to help us produce these electronic gaming machines. So what I'd say is that once the company realized that if you take a breath and look at what you're doing and try to optimize those processes and those development life cycles, that it really pays off down the road, because we went from producing 10,000 gaming machines per year to over 40,000, in a few years. So you think about what you have to do to scale, and that's really what I was responsible for, was to help the teams to do what they do best, which is deliver great content and great cabinets and great games. So afterwards, we started adding different types of businesses to our traditional land-based. So we have what we call our casual or social casino applications. So those are basically all mobile related phone games that we had many different. We have Big Fish Games, which does Gummy Drop and those social casual games, Evermerge, if you may be familiar. But then we also got into a company we acquired called Plarium, and Plarium builds a game called Raid Shadow Legends, which is one of the most popular RPG games out in the world right now. So all of the software comes in, we get into that social casino, and then now we're into real money gaming on mobile devices. So slot machines, different types of card games and live dealers. So we actually kind of grew this business from a land-based to a mobile to a real money, and then just kind of grown with our M&A and our organic growth. So I'm right now really responsible for the strategy to deliver our player experience to our customers in the best way possible, right? So I'm the one that generally gets all the bad news up front, right? So it can be a very challenging role, but it's always different, right? It always keeps you on your toes. And you have to be able to collaborate both vertically up and down and horizontally to all the different businesses. And I think what we've been successful at doing is really building a strategy that works for each of the business. It's not a one size fits all. And I think once you understand how the business operates, that's when you can start helping them to improve and get better and be even better at delivering that content to our players, customers, and building a really successful brand. And that's what we've done.
Interesting. So it sounds like the role of the quality engineering overall is the maybe overall responsibility that the product is going to be released in good quality. There's not going to be a lot of changes that need to happen, and also enable engineering kind of go faster and not worry, maybe still worry, but maybe worry a bit less regarding the different releases. When you see people coming into quality engineering, you have a group. What are usually their backgrounds, or what does quality engineering often overlap with? Do they overlap with something like maybe release managers, maybe overlap with people that are software engineers or hardware engineers, or overlap with program managers? Where do you see them coming from into the profession?
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of quality expertise comes from very different domains, whether it's software engineering, hardware engineering, cloud engineering, and what we found is that people generally don't start as in quality. They may start, like, testing is a great feeder job skill that really fits into quality. And then with it, quality engineering is just a little bit different, because quality engineering is more of a software engineer doing test quality engineering, like performance testing. So load, stress, scalability, using cloud tools. It's not, maybe back a few years ago, you might have had a stopwatch and things like that, but now everything's up in the cloud. So you need to know, CI/CD. You have to know the basics for software engineering or hardware engineering, if that's the side of the field you're coming in. So I'd say it's very broad. And what we're seeing as a macro within our gaming business is that our players and customers expect more from a quality experience than they did, say, 5 or 10 years ago. So expectations have grown, and what that's really forced us to do is to grow with our players and our customers. So, we talk about test engineers, we talk about software development engineers in test, or SDETs. That's a great field to get into. And they sit right next to our software engineers. And then we have quality assurance organizations. So I'd say that a lot of testers are very technical, because a lot of the software that we're testing is tested through the cloud, right? So you have to be able to, move between the software engineering and test, depending on what type of peripherals, or if you've got hardware or you got cloud. So I'd probably say that, if you like to roll up your sleeves and get involved with software development and test and deployment and release, it's a great field to get into. And it gives you a lot of flexibility too, as far as, do I need to work from the office? Do we have a hybrid within? For instance, at Aristocrat, we have a fully hybrid organization where, you can work remote if you want to work remote, but a lot of the collaboration that happens around game design, test, and engineering really does it. You got to talk to each other, right? So it's really a great field if you're inquisitive, if you're passionate, if you can put the player or the customer, at the heart of what you're doing, because we really do ensure that what we deliver to our customers is what they expect, and it meets their expectations. So it's always been kind of fun to me, because you get to go along for the ride as you're developing. You see these features, you see these different capabilities that the teams are building out, and you get to use them. You get to test games, you get to test platforms and GDKs and all that kind of good stuff. So it's really a great field to get into, and it's growing exponentially too, because, as I said, quality is really kind of the bar is being raised every day. For instance, if you were to go to Amazon, right, and you order something and they deliver, and you wanted a refrigerator, and your refrigerator came and everything worked, but the freezer didn't work. How happy would you be with that, right? Because we've all kind of been in that mode before, where we got something that didn't meet our expectations. But that's the way they are with our mobile handheld devices, right? When they play that game, they expect it to work. And it doesn't matter which device you're using either, right? Because everybody's got different stuff. So the challenges are really quite unique, but it's a very it's a fun field. It's enjoyable, and you can stay technically savvy and on cutting edge. And you can also, do the fun things like playing games that nobody's ever played before.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's something that, like, many good reasons to go into the field. And maybe I'll ask you, when you've been in the army for about a decade, then you were at the kind of the defense company for a decade. What led you to go into quality engineering? What was kind of the deciding factor for you? Because you probably thought about the different options and make that decision. What was kind of what attracted you from the multiple reasons you mentioned?
Well, as a young Dennis, I was I wanted to be really engaged with whatever I did. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to enjoy what I was doing. And back when I joined the service, it was, my family. I came from a long line of military, dating all the way back to the Revolutionary War in the United States, right? To the Civil War, and then uncles, grandfathers. So I said, hey, these are all great guys and ladies, right? And how can I, maybe I should give it a try. And I did. And I really found that the camaraderie, the hard work, it was very hard, the discipline. And back then I needed some discipline too. I was a little bit, I was all over the map, a little bit crazy, and I needed some of that discipline to kind of get my focus down the road. So I joined in, and they sent me to language school. So I learned Czech. I lived in Europe. I learned Russian. I traveled all over the world. And then one of my final station was at the Pentagon, where I actually worked on the hotline. So if that's the Moscow, Washington direct communication link. So how I started to get involved in that QE was we were rolling out some new capabilities to talk to our partners in the Kremlin from there. And they said, hey, we need to make sure we test this, right? Because everybody's developing it, and they're going like, well, no, we need a plan. How are we going to make sure this works? Because this is really a crisis hotline, and it's like 99 with 6 nines. Like you can't be down, right?
Yes.
So that's where I kind of started, getting into. And then what I liked was the cultural discussions that we had. Our Russian counterparts had different ways of thinking about it, and it really opened my eyes to collaboration, how important that is, cultural differences, understanding what they are, negotiations. What are we going to do? What are they going to do? How do we bring it together? So it was very exciting for me. And then when I decided it was my time to leave the service, it was going into defense was kind of it was the path of least resistance, right? I had a good amount of military experience in communications and all of the soft skills and technology. And I said, well, let me do that there, where we worked on unattended vehicles and sensors and all of this air ground. So it was really rather exciting to me. And after 10 years or 20 years of spending in military defense, I said, hey, you know what? I'm ready to do something different because it was becoming, not mundane, but it was regular. I knew what I was doing. It was kind of the same things, and it was just maybe over a year that I would start another project similar. So when some of our friends at RMS reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're rolling out this cloud thing. We need somebody to help us, transition our customers from a client server to this cloud," and I'm like, "Well, you know what? That's an area where I have some experience, but not the technical expertise that I need to be really successful." So when when I was getting ready to leave defense, I said, where can I go that I can learn the most and be challenged and stretched? And that was RMS with you, because I had never worked in a startup company, although it had been around for a while, it was still startup-y. And I got to work with some fantastic engineers and analysts and program managers. And then what I learned there is, after I think, and you probably remember this, but after a year of being at RMS, we had this really, really large test. We had our first cloud offering, and then our CEO and our senior leaders said, "Okay, Dennis, we need you to do some testing and tell us, are we ready to go?" And unfortunately, back then, we just weren't ready to go. Our technology was not solid. Our performance is from a load stress scale, and our functional ability. That software just wasn't what I would recommend to be put in front of a customer, right? So when I sat down with our CEO and I said, "Hey, there's some really good stuff in here, but let me tell you what's not working," right? Because I'm not, I think what really made my time at RMS was that I was honest with the results of what the test showed. And it wasn't a personal thing with me. It was like, we did these things well, but then there's these other things that we didn't do well. And my recommendation, and I was a senior director, right? So the senior director telling the CEO and the CTO that their software doesn't work and I wouldn't launch it. I thought that was probably going to be the shortest job in my entire career, right? I was like, they're definitely going to fire me, or they're going to do something. But they appreciated the honesty. They appreciated the metrics behind recommendations. And then, 3 or 4 more years later, I stayed with that company, and we launched some really good products. And it was just such a great experience for me. And I also got to really sharpen my cutting edge technology skills, right? So it really made me grow and extend both mentally, and to be able then to work, and it was an international company. We worked in Europe and Asia and all over the place. So that I really enjoyed. And that helped me to get into where I'm at now, which is as the Chief Quality Officer for Aristocrat.
That's very cool. Yeah, it sounds like you started like on the hotline back in the army days, the trajectory.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
been setting on a very cool course. I do want to ask you maybe a question about now about the
Sure.
quality engineering. Like we talked about it. I'm currently teaching students. I'm teaching
Mhm.
graduate for this semester at Cal State Fulton. Usually, people will, okay, I want to be a software engineer. Just that's kind of the default for computer science. What are maybe a way to think about kind of the trade-offs, maybe pros and cons about quality engineering? I think maybe from a position posting perspective, there's usually more software engineering. But I do wonder maybe how maybe students could think about kind of the pros and cons.
Sure. So, and I'm probably not saying something that you don't know, but there's so many different fields within software engineering that so many different languages, right? So a lot, when I think of like an SDET, a software development engineering test, or that QE, right? It's different than the QA, which tests that more functional, like if you were to say, does this game play how it's supposed to play? There's some functional testing, but can we deliver it as far as how do we deliver from sprint to sprint to sprint, and then how do we launch? It was for software engineers and test. I think the exciting thing for us was that it was kind of language agnostic, right? I mean, yes, you had to know to be able to do some troubleshooting and things like that. And you have to understand, but all of the monitoring tools, all of the delivery tools, which maybe some software engineers, if they're just developing features and things like that, may not, get into that. So what I found with testing and QE is that you get a very broad view of that, right? Which sets you up really nice to either go further in that software engineering or development and test, to product, to program, to strategy, because you get a very, very broad sense of how the business works and delivers products, whether it's hardware or software, or if they're integrated together. I always, software's fun to me. I just love it. I love seeing new features. I love seeing new creative ideas. And then I like to be able to try to break stuff. I don't know. It's like when I was a kid, I used to take transistor radios, and if they didn't work, I broke them apart and I took them all apart. Then I tried to put them back together. But I always enjoyed like breaking things. So, testing kind of came natural to me, because you have to kind of go, okay, now this is the way it's supposed to be played or used, like if it's an application or whatever it is. Now, what if I did this? Or what if I, instead of clicking checkout, I went back into the basket, adjusted the numbers, and then I checked out, and now I'm going, okay, well, why is this not match what I said? I removed this, but it's still in my basket. Now I've got two of them. Well, that's a bug, right? So I just, it takes, you've got to be passionate. You got to be inquisitive. You have to be an outside the box thinker. If you really want to kind of extend, just going in for, let's say, a test engineer to kind of build your capabilities. And then there's so many different areas. You could be a performance engineer. You could be an automation engineer. And automation engineering is so huge right now, right? Because everybody is launching applications and games and stacks and everything like that. But how do you ensure that that's what you're delivering, what our promise is or your business's promises? So I just think it's pretty cool, and you can specialize, or you can then kind of get a broader understanding. And that kind of goes to where I'm at now. Is I was a tester, I was a test engineer. I worked on security, so that's another piece. So a lot of the cyber engineering, cyber test that's a fascinating field, and you can do many things. Performance engineers, many things. Automation engineers is where everybody wants to have automation in their test, but not everybody can do it. It's very challenging. And you have to have some real good software engineering knowledge, skills. Doesn't mean you have to write code, but you do need to know how to write scripts, and you do need to use CI/CD or continuous integration, continuous deployment, and bring that automation in. So and the maturity as your business matures, so does that automation piece, right? Because you can do it in a small scale, and you can be manual and do all those things, and that's great. And you can deliver great products, but how do you do that at scale? How do you build the business to be able to then do, instead of one application in a year, can you do three? And you can't do that if you don't have that automation and that test engineering built into your SDLC.
Interesting. So it's almost like sometimes people might be in quality engineering, but they might call it a different name. So it might be performance engineering, or
Yep.
might be automation engineering, or build engineering. It's, as you mentioned, the area where it's you are using code, you're writing code, but it's less about kind of this specific language, and it's more about the system as a whole and how the customer is experiencing them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's it's very rewarding when you see a product that you've been sitting side saddle with developer to be launched, and then when it gets launched, the test engineers are always going, okay, I did the very best I could, and and you get it out there in the wild, and it's a huge success. But I would tell you though that I've also been in the other side of the seat where we launch something and there's bugs, right? And so a lot of times you don't get a second chance right now, right? If you launch something, an application or a game, and it breaks, or the user experience is bad, you don't get another chance sometimes, right? So and you've seen all the even with phones and computer systems and smart devices and things like that, so it's really a very interesting field, and it's becoming much broader and broader as we move down the road. And I think the expectations, as I said, are always increasing for quality and delivery. And then in the macro part, it is if you go out and look at test engineers, QE, huge number of requirements out there for people coming out of school that want to get into the field. And I'll even throw a pitch for my company. We're always looking for software engineers, hardware engineers, test engineers, because talent is key, and it's really hard finding those good ones. So we're always looking for smart, passionate, energetic individuals to join. And I see that in other companies around too.
Well, that's a very good transition maybe to another question, which is you are currently in the gaming industry. Some people might not be familiar. There were a bunch of layoffs in high tech that were
Yep.
in the news. And it sounds like your company is still like growing. I wonder, how does the gaming industry like now as a whole, and how is maybe the employment opportunities or the employment opportunities with your companies? I assume that people might just not be interested with this industry, or in particular company as a whole. So maybe you can share some information.
Sure. So look, there's many different types of gaming companies. So if you look at like an EA, or you look at an Activision Blizzard, and you've seen them in the news with Microsoft. So the box top games, which are kind of no longer box top games, but delivered through the cloud, are these games that literally take 2 or 3 years to build and to release, right? So that's if you were to say that's one big area of gaming. The area of gaming we're in is you can launch new games, new titles, new slot machine within a year. If you look at our social casino game, we can probably launch games slot games within 6 months, but then larger games within a year, right? And it's the mobile game, because those are very popular, as you're aware. So I'd probably say that from a gaming perspective, they call gaming recession proof, because people still want to play games. So you see a lot of high tech, layoffs and things like that for these larger companies. But within the gaming business, it's actually been going very well in our business, which is that mobile. Real money gaming, free to play, the Plarium, the Raid Shadow Legend, those are still very popular. Now, the macro of, during COVID, our business went like just incredibly through the roof, right? Because people were in their houses, they weren't going outside, and now we're seeing people want to spend time outside. So now it's about how we deliver that great content, and also that live ops. So how do we acquire new users? How do we retain users? How do we monetize that? And what we're seeing from our business is very positive on the gaming side, both the real money in the casinos in Las Vegas and Macau, all over the world and all over the country, to our social mobile games, to our real money gaming platform. That's our newest business. So I'd say from a recession perspective, this is a really good business, really safe business to be in right now. But just like any other business, right? You've got to show value. You've got to be on the top of your game. You have to be collaborative. You have to be a team player. You have to be able to work across organizations, cross-functional. And I think those are the skills that will really and then if you have those technical skills and you've got those other soft skills, you are golden. That's, if I had to say anything, there's so many smart people out there that are fantastic engineers, software engineers, hardware engineers, but it's the people that can relate to other people in other organizations that really succeed and kind of keep moving up.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see that also working in tech as well. This recommendation, soft skills are important, smartness too, but you need to be able to work with people. So one of the interesting things here is that let's say that somebody now is said, I'm sold. I would like to apply. What are some things that they can do to increase their chances of getting hired as they maybe send a resume or preparing for an interview? What are some key elements that you're looking for with the people that you're interviewing into? If it's if it's a performance engineer, if it's like a system automation, or what are some things to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think, I hate to say networking, but, networking is so important right now. We have automation that does scans for keywords and things like that, in our big talent acquisition process. But really what I find makes a difference is to have connections that can then, yes, you have to have a good CV. You got to have a good resume, right? It's got to be clear, concise. It's got to show what your value could be to the business. But you also have to make the connections to say, okay, this CV here goes with a real person, and that real person, whether it reached out to you through social media, LinkedIn, or whatever that is. That really helps a lot, because we here at Aristocrat really count on our employees to provide recommendations for great talent. So I'd say, what I did was I looked for businesses or industries that I was very interested in. Like I wanted to get into gaming because I love to play games. I like to play mobile games. I love to play games. So I said, where would I want to work? And I said, okay, I want to work in gaming. So then I started looking at companies, and I go, okay, I didn't imagine that I would ever work in the gaming, in the casino industry, right, where we develop games and you play slot machines. But what I found out was that Aristocrat was a relatively long-standing company, maybe 30 years, headquartered out of Australia, as I said, but their growth trajectory was pretty incredible. When I came to the company, the stock was at maybe $6 or $7 a share, and now it's at like $37 or $38 a share. So what I did was I looked for the industry that I wanted. I looked for those companies that had jobs that I was most interested in. And then I looked at the trajectory of the company to say, are they hiring? Do they have a good culture? You know, all of those other things beyond just this job looks really great, but what about the people? What about the CEO? You know, so I kind of targeted the business that I wanted to get into, and then I actively started to become engaged with people that were already in the business. And I think that opened an opportunity up for me that I might not have had if I was just, you know, on my computer screen and submitted, as you said, maybe 1,000 resumes, right, to different jobs. So I think that is key to finding the job, one that you're passionate about and that you would love, but also the business that, you know, really has some good standing from an ESG perspective, from an equal opportunity perspective, and I got lucky with Aristocrat. So another pitch for Aristocrat is go to aristocrat.com and you'll see jobs all over the world for hard skills with software engineering, hardware engineering, but also everything in between. You'll see quality opportunities. You'll see product program management. So I think, you know, using that type of strategy worked for me, and I think it could work for others.
Interesting. So one of the things that you mentioned is the process by which maybe picking the company. So you mentioned like an industry that you were interested in, you're looking like company, and then you're looking like growth, and you're looking at opportunities in. And then one of the things that you mentioned is referrals. Here's a question about referrals. So sometimes when, and again, this is maybe working in big companies, sometimes referral requires you to specify how much, let's say, you know, that person work, or how much you know you've worked with that person, or any other types of elements. So how much you recommend, let's say that somebody is reaching out to, like when we're talking about referral, let's assume somebody does not know anybody in Aristocrat. Is that like a LinkedIn message? Is that like maybe to somebody who's hiring? Like what's the, how do they do that networking in reality to be effective? What's a good way to network?
Yeah. I think you know, a couple of the ways that I've seen it work for my team as we hire, just you know, is really to look at the role and go, okay, is this a service delivery? Is this a program or product management? And doing some related searches on people within Aristocrat that are in those roles. And it's happened, you know, people have reached out to me and said, hey, I'm really passionate about quality, continuous improvement. I'm a Lean Six Sigma, I'm a black belt, I've done this and I've done that. You know, is there someone that, you know, you could connect me to that maybe could tell me a little bit about the role, right? So just a simple, a couple sentences to say, hey, I'm interested in this, and believe it or not, that kind of opens up doors. Now you can't do spam and spam everybody, but I think if you really know what you want to do and you really know the field that you want to get into, you can. There's no reason why you can't reach out to somebody on LinkedIn or other platforms to really connect. And I think that in most cases that'll get a little crack in the door, right? Maybe won't open the door wide, but I think as you target these companies that you're really interested in, I think it really does help to at least communicate. And I would also say that it's, you know, have a profile on LinkedIn. You know, it might sound like everybody says the same thing, but it really does matter. If someone sends me a note and there's no picture and it's like anonymous, hey, I'm interested in this, I don't respond. Now, if somebody were to send me, say, hey, I'm this person, I'm transitioning, I'm really excited, I'd love to get into the gaming business, you know, do you have any advice, you know, or do you have any recommendations? And that has opened and created some opportunities for people. And you don't have to reach out to the chief quality officer. There's a laundry list of quality people within Aristocrat, right? Find the right one, find the appropriate level that you're kind of looking at, and then start doing the work to make connections.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good advice. I think it's also like personalized, as you mentioned. You know that this person put some effort, and it's not one of like this automatic kind of sending to people.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question maybe about some other types of personalization, maybe to hear your thoughts if you think they're maybe more or less effective and how much change they're making. For example, let's say when somebody gets interviewed, how important it is to understand the vertical. And understanding the vertical means understanding, let's say, the business of the company, understanding the client of the company, understanding, I'm talking specifically about, let's say, something like QA is part of engineering, and understanding maybe maybe the red couple of games that they've done, kind of really understanding that company. Those two things kind of come up and add value for and add odds. So this is one question. And the second, sometimes company have like cover letters. In cover letters, people might try to say something extra in addition to their resume, why they might be a fit, basically getting them in that first interview. What are your thoughts regarding those two types of personalization? How do they actually make much of a difference?
Yeah, I think, with cover letters are an interesting thing because they give you an opportunity to tell you a little bit about yourself that's not related to, this is what I've done, here's my skills, here's my education. And I think in some cases they can be very valuable because my sense is not a lot of people write cover letters. I mean, I've seen some, I've written some for myself. I've helped others write cover letters because I do think in cases, if you're really being targeting in what you're looking for, I think a cover letter is a very valuable thing because, you know, going from defense to, catastrophic risk modeling, which is a huge leap. But I think what businesses look for now is a well-rounded experience too, right? So you don't just because Aristocrat's a gaming company doesn't mean you have to have gaming experience. Now it's a plus, right, in some circumstances. But again, we always look for fresh perspectives on how we're doing things. So if we get somebody from a different industry that comes in, puts together a nice CV, has a great cover letter, and has reached out, whether it's through some type of online or another thing, that is pretty valuable is like conferences and things too, right? And they can be online, they could be virtual, they could be in person. But if you know an industry that you want to get into, like a gaming, all kinds of little conferences and at no cost. Some of them are free. So joining communities, starting to talk to people about, hey, I'm really interested and I want to be a game designer or I want to be a game tester, right? You've got to start making those connections, and there's many different ways other than just getting behind LinkedIn and sending a connection request, right? So I think if you look at the broader perspective of where you can go to open those doors up, I think there's many different ways to do that. And I think that, again, from my perspective, we love to have people from different industries come in, especially if they've got the skills that we're looking for. You can teach gaming, right? It's going to take you 6 months before you feel like you're a part of the team and you're contributing. But if you think about it, it's almost everywhere, right? Unless it's not a very tech kind of field, and you can go in and it's kind of repetitive. But within quality engineering, every day is a different day, and you have to be okay with that, right? And I think that's where you can find some opportunities, is if you start to do the other things about getting a job and not just sending out resumes. You got to make those connections.
And by the way, this is a very good tip regarding the conferences, the summits, in person, not in person. If you're interested in an industry, you can catch tens of companies, if not more. And often if somebody is not with a company or even a student, people can volunteer, do it pretty on the cheap. So that is,
I agree.
Yeah.
There's other organizations too, like for quality. There's ASQ, which is the American Society for Quality. There's international quality. So there's these are all the things like that are connected to trying to get into a field, but that are like on the periphery. But again, if you want to get into quality, if you want to get into quality engineering, there's associations for all of that. So again, is try to be as creative as you can, but also know what you want. Right, I would not recommend just throwing 1,000 resumes out and seeing what sticks. Right, be more thoughtful in what you want to do, where you want to do it. But I also understand some people you just need a job, right? Sometimes you're just in a spot where you got to pay the bills, right? So maybe you can't be, but the best time to look for another job is when you got one. Right? I mean, because we all, have a mortgage and a rent and a car and all that kind of stuff, and you got to take care of family and yourself. So you got to take all that in mind. But I'd also say, don't be one of those that jumps around from company to company after a year or so, because that's a red flag for anybody to see a CV that has, I spent a year and a half here, a year and a half here, a year and a half there, and it's like, okay, I want somebody who's going to come here and spend some time with us and be committed, and I know it's not like it was 20 years ago where people would stay with a company for their whole life, but 3 or 4 years or 5 years with a company is, that's pretty meaningful to hiring managers, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's somebody who's looking for a way to get it to work, right?
Right.
I have a question about one of the things that you mentioned. You made some significant changes in your career from a domain perspective, right? So you went from the military to defense company to working at catastrophic insurance to working in gaming, and those things are quite different than each other. So maybe my question is, first, let's start with the first one. Let's assume somebody now is trying to get into software, trying to get into the first position in software. And in particular, let's say two examples. One, they might come from, let's say, the military. They haven't been in software. They're trying to kind of break into software. And the second, they might just be like new graduate of computer science, right? So there are tens of thousands, if not more, that start every year, and it's kind of very hard to differentiate, especially in a tough hiring market. What are some ways a person, maybe without much of a real software working experience, can get that first job, coming from a different industry or just fresh out of fresh out of like bachelor degree in engineering?
I think you bring up a good point, because education is important, right? And I've always been a lifelong learner. So the bachelor's degree, the master's degree, then programs, right? Certificate programs and the like. But I think you've got to show whatever it is that you did, whether it's school or a job or something, do that as well as you possibly can, even though this is my first job or anything. And I would also say that if you want to get into software and you're not a software engineer, there's great opportunities in testing, in program management, in product management. So I think what I kind of did was I had different jobs in different fields because I had some valuable skills that could be applied to, whether it's test engineering, whether it's program management or product management, because again, when you get into a good business, there's always lots of opportunities there. First, become the best at whatever it is you're doing, but then it also creates opportunities for you then to look around and go, you know what? I really, really would love to do this. So what do I need to do? Do I need to go and get my a security certificate? Maybe you want to get into cyber engineering. Do you want to get into program management? Maybe you do a PMP or a PMI, something. So there's these things which shows potential employers that you're really serious. You're that lifelong learner. You want to get your foot in the door. Maybe that first job is not exactly what you want to do, but it's a great company. It's a great opportunity. So you take that. You become very good at it. That will open up opportunities for you. So I'd say, if you don't have the skills, you find something closely related to that you do have the skills and experience for. And then as you work through that, education, certificate programs. And then there's all the other ones for, like within testing, there's ITSB. So there's all of these courses that you can take to become a certified software tester, and they're not a huge investment. They might cost you a little bit of money, but you have to commit the time to it. Right? So you have to create the space for you to do that while you still have a family, or you're still doing this, or you're still doing that, because everybody's always got something going on. But if you show that employer that you're serious about that and you're serious about upskilling yourself, I think that's pretty valuable too.
Yeah, I think it also links to something you said in the past about commitment. It shows that you're committed to, let's say, become a QE or go to a certain industry or to go to a certain company, and people kind of, it helps to differentiate from others.
Yeah.
And maybe we're almost at time, but like one of the things I have a question is, so I'm teaching now a graduate class and people might do it for maybe a year, for two, and they have opportunities to get involved with different things at the university. Maybe they have the opportunity to get their, I don't know, A plus instead of like an
Yeah.
A,
Yeah.
or maybe they have the opportunity to get internships, which many told me it's quite challenging. What are your thoughts regarding when somebody is building their resume or building their experience or building the credentials through going through a university? What are the top things that they can do? Like, what's your tip? What's the top thing that they can do, one or two or three, in order to make the resume more compelling, while there is many, many, many others who potentially also have similar degrees?
Yeah, I think, the internship piece is really interesting. We do intern programs here. I think most businesses do them. I also think there's great opportunities at universities to do work study programs too, that will then differentiate yourself from those that, have a degree. But I think being able to say, hey, I can better myself through education while still building my reputation, my skills is really important, right? Because it is super competitive out there. But I also think that, there's great opportunities out there right now. Again, it depends what you want to do, but if you're thoughtfully doing, if you're committed to go back for your graduate degree, you've already done a good body of work. This degree then should be targeting what you want to do for maybe you're at a mid-career point, or maybe you're somewhere else. But to be able to really thoughtfully say, I'm not doing this degree just to have a piece of paper to hang on my wall, but there's a reason I'm taking this, because I'm interested in this, I want to do this. And I think if you can put that together with even like part-time work, if you're not a full-time student, or you continue to work while you still get your degree, that says a lot. It really does, right? Even if you haven't finished your degree, you can say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I've got all these job skills, and oh, by the way, I'm also doing professional development, and I'm doing, I'm working on my graduate degree this, or certificate program that. That says a lot. That's like reading in between the lines when you see a CV and you go, okay, when was the last time this person went to a certificate program, or a degree, and you can kind of tell what people are interested in, and if they're really motivated, because they're going to have like a nice little trail that you can read that says, okay, they did this, now they were interested in cyber, or they were interested in performance, or they were, those are all the things that I do to kind of build. And then during that whole degree program, I would start targeting those industries that you're most interested in, like we talked about earlier. Start figuring out where you want to work, who you want to work with. And then what I found too, after I finished my degree program too, was it's almost more important who you work for than what you're doing, because a good boss makes the difference in it, and it will really accelerate your career if you have a good one. If you don't, it can be very tough. And I think we've all have good bosses and not so good bosses, but I think that that really will help you if you have a plan. Just don't go get your degree and go, okay, I got my degree, so now I'm going to apply to 100 companies. That could be frustrating.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing that you mentioned, maybe two tips that you mentioned, just to repeat it, when you're thinking about a resume, even as a bachelor, you can show that you have initiatives, motivated, you took project, you've done things, and also just show what you're actually interested in. Are you front end? Are you back end? Are you interested in a
Yep.
certain domain or a certain industry, or anything that basically says that it's not just one out of like 1,000 resumes that you
Yeah.
send away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's great.
agree.
And there is a good, by the way, saying about the last thing that you mentioned. What do people say? They say a lot of people, they join companies, quit managers.
It's
So
true. And everybody's been there. Everybody has. So it really does matter, right? So you should be interviewing them as they interview you, I would say.
Totally. We are at time. I really appreciate, Dennis, the insights that you're sharing with the students and everybody else who will watch the channel. And thank you very much. And it's good chatting with you again.
You're welcome, Itay.